If they say he's stepping aside because we don't think he can win, that is something that goes against the whole Save Democracy platform that they've been going on and on and on about for the last 8 years. They can't say why, because it's going to reveal one way or the other a bad situation for the Democrats.
Kamala Harris is not Barack Obama. They're trying to give her the Obama treatment. She has none of his charisma. She's just as radical, if not more radical, with none of the charm.
What changed between Saturday night when he was all in? This was what he was going to do. And then Sunday, all of a sudden, he just has this epiphany. And Steve's right. This isn't some country first patriot. He got run out of town by his own party. I mean, Donald Trump survived an actual assassination attempt, and Biden was killed by a political assassination.
All right, guys, it's Thursday. We're on a glide path to the weekend, but there is no day that news isn't breaking these days, which is why we're here and we go live. Last night, great live discussion while the president spoke. Always a reminder, that's a good reason to hit that notification button. What a robust discussion we had while President Biden went on for almost 12 minutes, telling us about every buzzword, talking point, historical reference, the importance of the desk he was sitting at, but never the why. Why did he not run? He talked about passing a torch, everything, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I want to get to that. Plus, Benjamin Netanyahu addressing a joint session of Congress, and the aftermath was just absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. I know last night was a late night, but no matter what, I always take my Beam Dream Powder. It makes sure I can hit the pillow right away and fall asleep. I've taken magnesium in the past, melatonin, all sorts of natural stuff to help my sleep. The Beam Dream Powder, though, it is a dream come true. That's not a joke at all. It's got the magnesium, the melatonin, it's got theanine, it's got reishi and apigen, all of it in one amazing powder. I love the cinnamon flavor. It is unbelievable. I take a scoop of that, put it in some water, microwave it for 30 seconds, and then within 30 to 45 minutes, you are ready to go to bed. They've also got the brownie flavor, unbelievably tasty as well. I would drink this all day long if it didn't put you to sleep and keep you asleep. That's the thing. Once you go to sleep, it's like amazing. And you wake up, no grogginess, no nothing. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. You get up to 40% off. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. For an unbelievable chance, and you will not regret this. If you are someone that has trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, you've got to try Beam's Dream Powder. Biden addressed the nation last night, 12 minutes. He weaved in Kamala at the end. I think the Trump campaign has a strong case for equal time. That was literally like someone said, let's put a bunch of talking points and buzzwords. You just read them, throw in some historical references about democracy and Thomas Jefferson, and we'll call it a day. It was unbelievable. And the press gave him the pass of all passes. I just want to remind you folks, and I've said this every day, this race has changed fundamentally. Trust me when I tell you, they are all in for Kamala. And we're going to discuss this with the panel in just a second. Trump, though, is in North Carolina at a rally. He made it very clear, no more Mr. Nice Guy. Take a look.
For 3.5 years, Lion Kamala Harris has been the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe. She is a radical left lunatic who will destroy our country. If she ever gets the chance to get into office, we're not going to let that happen. You know, I was supposed to be nice. They say something happened to me when I got shot. I became nice. And when you're dealing with these people, they're very dangerous people. When you're dealing with them, you can't be too nice. You really can't be. So if you don't mind, I'm not going to be nice. Is that okay?
All right. You know who else spoke yesterday? Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, joint session of Congress, laid out a very compelling case about what's at stake right now and what he's doing. And in response, the Democrats went all in with the pro-Hamas protesters. Outside of Union Station, which is the train station just blocks from the Capitol, they defaced monuments, vandalized stuff, burned American flags. Disgusting. And yet the media then called them rally goers, protesters. It's absolutely disgusting what's happening. I cannot believe it. We've got an unbelievable panel coming your way. Steve Cortez, as you remember, he is with the Trump campaign in 2016, 2020. He is the founder of the League of American Workers, does some amazing polling. Hogan Gidley, he is the current vice chair of the Center for Election Integrity at America First Policy Institute, former national press secretary for the Trump campaign and former deputy press secretary in the Trump White House. And then Grace Curley, the host of the Grace Curley Show on WRKO 680 out there in Boston. She's a contributor to the Boston Herald as well. Before I bring in the panel, though, I want to tell you about my friends at Tax Network, because at least now, while the Democrats are in charge, we have to worry about the IRS coming after us. It's just a fact. They hired 50,000 new IRS agents. Those folks are not sitting around Washington twiddling their thumbs, wondering how to pass the day playing Tetris. They're coming after us. And it's not some like cost-benefit analysis. We're just going to go after the people with the most money. They don't care if you owe $5,000, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, whether it's personal or business, whether you had problems during COVID, it doesn't matter. They're coming after you, and they will come into your life and turn it upside down. I don't think that's an exaggeration at all. When the IRS comes for you, they're going to go through every aspect of your life. The people at Tax Network USA have already recovered over $1 billion for their clients. They have the expertise and the trusted insight to be your guide when experiencing one of these things. So do not respond to the IRS. Call them back, let them in your house, whatever, until you talk to my friends at Tax Network USA. Go to tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, full name, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, or call them at 1-800-245-6000. But do not engage with the IRS. They mean business, and the upside is you've got an unbelievable advocate with the folks at Tax Network USA. All right, guys, I want to bring in this panel and break down everything that's going on, plus how Kamala Harris is starting to message and how effective Donald Trump should be going back at her. Here we go. Let's bring the panel in. Guys, I gotta admit, that speech to me was unbelievably disappointing. Steve, I want to start with you. I have been railing about this for days, about this letter that Biden launched initially. Like, there was no why. Why are you dropping out? And then last night, it was even more pathetic. It was sort of like, I want to pass the torch. Well, the torch has been standing there, bro. The torch has been available. What did you think was there in the speech, and what was your take?
Yeah, listen, I think it was delusional, and certainly the corporate media reaction was equally delusional. This idea that Biden has done something grand and something selfless, right? That he's passing on power. No, he lost in a backroom deal. It was a bloodless coup, a political coup, staged by Nancy Pelosi, by the oligarchs who run the Democratic Party, and he lost in that power struggle. So there was nothing genuine, nothing statesmanlike about what happened. He came out on the wrong end of a bloodless internal Democratic coup, and Democrat voters, by the way, were completely disenfranchised in this dirty process. That's the reality of what happened to Joe Biden. If he wants to try to convince the American people otherwise, I guess he can just continue to lie, which he's done a great job of for 3.5 years now in the Oval Office. But the people are not going to buy it. And I also would like to make just a second point that I think is critical. Why would he not pass the torch at some point? Because even he does not believe that Kamala Harris is capable. He doesn't believe that she's capable of winning, and he doesn't believe that she's capable of governing as president of the United States. I think that tells you quite a lot about Kamala Harris, that even the man who selected her recognized, and his team recognized, that she is not ready for prime time, certainly not ready for the presidency.
Hogan Gidley, what did you think of the speech and the media reaction?
Oh, it was disgusting. It was despicable. He had every opportunity to rise to the moment here. He gave us no information, no new information whatsoever. In fact, he didn't even say why he got out. I mean, what changed between Saturday night when he was all in?
Thank you.
This was what he was going to do. And then Sunday, all of a sudden, he just has this epiphany. And Steve's right. This isn't some country first patriot. He got run out of town by his own party. I mean, Donald Trump survived an actual assassination attempt, and Biden was killed by a political assassination. And remember, as bad as Joe Biden is, and Kamala Harris is way more radical and way more unlikable, okay? But don't underestimate the power of the media. In 3 weeks, the media was able to coalesce and push the sitting president of the United States out of the race. They are going to rally around Kamala Harris, not like they did before, which is kind of in part. Now it's going to be a full-throated, she is the best vice president, most prepared, ready to go. The same media that said, Russia collusion was real, that the Hunter Biden laptop and the Ashley Biden diary were fake, and that Joe Biden behind the scenes, while he may look frail and feeble and fragile in front of you, he's running triathlons behind your back. That's the same media that's going to tell you Kamala Harris is ready to go. This speech encapsulated what was wrong, though, with the Democrat Party. It went all over the place. It was platitude after platitude about democracy. I thought we were going to tone down that rhetoric, by the way. That lasted about 15 minutes. And then he went on to say he was the best president ever. He was the most accomplished president ever. But I probably should give it on to someone else for age or something, because someone else should take the torch. You never said why you were stepping down. And if you're so good, why are you getting out? I mean, the whole thing was insane.
No, I'm so glad. I was like yelling at this thing. I'm like, so wait a second. Up until 72 hours ago, you were defiant. We have to, I'm the best person. I've got this record. I've got a job to finish. And then suddenly last night it was, I got to pass the torch. And I'm like, what, where's that, Grace? What? And yet the media afterwards, the panels that were there, the Today Show and other outlets this morning were like, it was a historic, graceful speech where the president waxed philosophically about his legacy and invoked Thomas Jefferson and, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I was like, what is going on here? We're being doxxed.
Yeah, they're trying to compare him to George Washington. It's a heavy lift. Like even when you look at how much they've been trying to carry water for him, I think that Hogan and Steve are absolutely right. No one's believing that he did this out of the kindness of his heart or his love for this country. But I want to get back to the vagueness of the speech and how he didn't say anything. And it's starting to make me think, and I was thinking this about KJP as well when she was addressing this yesterday. I think the vagueness is part of this fear of a legal battle that's going to go on with disenfranchising 14 million people. And it kind of puts them in this weird situation where if they say, well, he's stepping down because of health issues, then they're admitting that this has been a giant cover up for the past 4 years. But if they say he's stepping aside because we don't think he can win, that is something that goes against the whole save democracy platform that they've been going on and on and on about for the last 8 years. So they've kind of found themselves in this bind. So even KJP, they're asking her, like, why is he stepping aside? And she's like, well, tune in tonight. You'll hear about it. They can't say why because it's going to reveal one way or the other a bad situation for the Democrats.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that you just put your finger on it. They can't, because they either say he can't win and that you're admitting politically this is all that mattered to you, right? I'm the best person, blah, 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 great legacy, huge record, but I can't win. And that's why I'm stepping aside and I'm disenfranchising all these people. Or I have to admit that I don't have the mental acuity and fitness for office, in which case it becomes a national security issue. So I'm just going to reference why this desk that I'm sitting in front of is so historic, and then use a bunch of buzzwords about democracy, but never actually address the why. I mean, I was like,
shouldn't Trump ask for equal time here? I mean, it was a political speech. Yeah. It was a political speech. So they did, Hogan, they did this. I'm glad you brought this up. They did ask for equal time. Now, here's the thing. Legally, if it's about his presidency or whatever, the networks can probably cover for him. Once he injected Kamala Harris and voting, it does become a political issue and he gets equal time, right? 100%. And I think that's something we should rail on. Look, the media is obviously biased. They always will be. They're always slanted. We talk about how unpopular they are because they've lied and covered up so many different things. And always the difference between a conspiracy theory and reality is about 6 to 8 months, typically, when you're talking about the Democrats and the media. But this is a great example of that. When you go up there and you give that political speech, Donald Trump and his campaign either should sue or should make all types of hay on television news saying, wait, I want my same time, because clearly what Joe Biden was doing, instead of talking about the high-minded ideals of the country writ large and why it was so incumbent upon him with a frailty of some kind to step down, he gets up there and talks about threats to democracy. And then, of course, goes on to say, while we're on the subject, we need to get rid of the Supreme Court, just so we're clear. So democracy. Also, we're so democratic. We have a nominee now that no one voted for. That's democracy. I mean, it's just insane to watch this guy try and square all these holes.
Well, and by the way, to that point, Chris LaCivita did make a public statement that the campaign attorneys will be contacting the network. So I hope that they're successful. That's good. Smart, that they are pursuing that. Regarding the media too, look, trust in media is already absolutely in the tank, but it's going to go, I think, even lower, because it's very clear that the media, the very same characters, the same platforms, the same media mavens who so viciously turned on Joe Biden. And I mean, they really did. I mean, like a pack of wolves turned on Joe Biden. They are now just as ferociously trying to promote Kamala Harris with that same degree of tenacity. And here's the problem. Kamala Harris is not Barack Obama. They're trying to give her the Obama treatment. And look, I obviously don't agree with any of the policies of Barack Obama, but I'll be the first to admit he was an unbelievably skilled politician. She has none of that. She has none of his charisma, of his skills of oratory. She has none of it. She's just as radical, if not more radical, with none of the charm of Biden even, or of Barack Obama. And so because of that, I think that the media is, again, trying so hard to sell us something that the American people simply won't buy, because she's incredibly radical and she's super unlikable. And that's not just my opinion, by the way. If we look at favorability surveys, she is way more upside down than other politicians. Most politicians are upside down, by the way. They are more unfavorable than favorable, but hers are extreme.
Grace, let me ask you a question. We're sitting here talking about how this is ridiculous, that he should have got an equal time. He doesn't answer the why question. You brought up KJP doesn't answer the why question. These are all legitimate discussion points. And to Steve's point, I think Hogan kind of echoed it, like he got pushed out, right? There's a democratic process that they were hanging their hat on 72 hours ago. 14 million people voted in the primaries and voted for him. And suddenly, forget that. Age was an issue. Suddenly we should forget all that. Okay, this is insane. Does it matter? Right? In other words, what I mean by that is, are we spinning our wheels talking about the past? The process was ridiculous. Are we yelling at the refs in the middle of the game while the game's still playing on issues, multiple, right? Equal time, all this, that don't actually affect anybody that's going to matter in this election? Or is it worth having this fight now?
Typically, I would say no, but I think what makes this different is just the sheer amount of chaos that's been going on for the last 9 days. You had this attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Joe Biden was pretty absent for it. You had all these rumblings of, is he going to drop out? Is he not going to drop out? If he drops out of running, is he going to resign the presidency? Why can he still be in as president, but he can't run as president if there's not a health issue? And something I'll add in is that for someone who's, if there's someone out there who's not politically in the weeds per se, there's a feeling you get uneasy when there's no one there, when you're waiting 6 or 7 days and you haven't seen the president. It doesn't mean you love the president, you don't like the president. I don't mean that. I just mean there's a general concern when you're in the United States of America and there's people going, we haven't seen Joe Biden in 7 days. That's unnerving for people. I don't think it's a feeling that people like to have for a prolonged period of time. It's this kind of chaotic, you're not getting a clear message. And then, as Hogan and Steve pointed out, it's this pivot that I always feel like the Democrats used to be better about being a little bit more subtle. They used to work people into it a little bit more. The media was better at the nuance. And now it's just the drastic turn that I think is it's making people who aren't even that invested in politics go, wait a second. So is he running, or now we're supposed to be on board with her? And I just think in general, it's chaos. And I do think that resonates with people.
There was my favorite journalism professor when I went to Ole Miss was basically a Marxist atheist, but he would not let you put an editorialized word in a story, and he would fail you in 2 seconds. He was one of the best journalists I ever knew because he was a reporter in Memphis. And he always used to talk about kind of the cable wars, and he would say, people at home can't tell you what's wrong with a package, a story, a soundbite. They can't tell you if it's a little out of focus. They don't know what it is. They don't have the vernacular, but they know something's wrong.
Yeah.
And when they know something's wrong, they'll just change the channel. So it's incumbent upon you to have a good, tight story, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I think you're alluding to here, in that the American people don't know the nuances of, wait, there were 14 million voters and then they just flipped it. Are there rules? As if Democrats care about law and the rules. They'll just flip it. It doesn't matter. But they don't know what's wrong. They just know something's wrong, and it makes them uncomfortable. And then when they actually do tune in and they see Kamala Harris, you realize Kamala Harris, when she ran for president, was rated to the left of Bernie Sanders, a socialist, and Elizabeth Warren. She ranked 8th amongst black voters in the Democratic side of the aisle, behind lily white Vermont Bernie Sanders and fake Indian Elizabeth Warren. She went on a debate stage and called her opponent. This is after she had worked with Beau Biden for years and praised it and used it to her advantage, called Joe Biden a segregationist and a sex criminal, had T-shirts made, ready to go, still couldn't capitalize on it, and was out of the race shortly thereafter. Despite all of those failures and her positions on radical ideology, the media is still going to try to shove her down our throats again. And I would argue, while the minutia of this is fodder for us to talk about, and it will pass, the here and now is she's going to be at the top of the ticket. She has some of the most radical beliefs in the history of presidential politics in this country. And every day we should spend pointing out that she uses pronouns when she introduces herself, that she is against fracking, that she tried to bail out Black Lives Matter rioters, didn't want to raise money for the folks who lost businesses and will never have a job again, or the families of cops who were targeted and killed by those rioters. She raised money for people to get out of jail who caused all of the destruction, $4 billion worth of damage. And those people got out of jail and committed more crimes. Those are the things we need to focus on to just expose her, because, Sean, look, we all know this. Politics is the art of defining your opponent before they define themselves. You've got 4 weeks where the media is going to say she's the best thing ever. The campaign, the PAC, all of us need to be out there saying, no, this is who she is. Hear her own words. Show that to the American people. And I think she's going to have a really tough time, because as this goes on, the more she talks, the more she is out there, the more unlikable she is. And I think they're going to run kind of the Joe Biden, Steve, you and I know this well, the 2020 campaign, put her kind of in the basement and keep her very scripted on teleprompter.
Steve, what do you think of that?
So listen, I think I'm very glad that Hogan brought up the 2020 race, because I think that is important and very revealing. Because remember, in that primary, that Democrat primary, the media clearly identified Kamala as their darling then, and they gave her absolutely fawning coverage, and it didn't work. She didn't get anywhere. I think when she dropped out, she was polling at 3%. She didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. She literally couldn't even make it to actual voting. That's how poorly she performed, despite, again, having all of the possible tailwinds possible from the corporate media. So I think the proof is in the pudding. I mean, voters rejected them. Those are Democrat voters, by the way. Democrat voters who you would think might be more open to her radicalism. But they were having none of it, including black voters, by the way. No appeal with them. So I think that it's instructive. It's going to be, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it at least rhymes. I think it's going to happen again this time. The media, again, is going to try their best to create, in their view, to fashion her into some sort of a female Barack Obama. But that's just not going to work. She's way too radical. She's way too unlikable.
I want to ask, sorry, Steve, I just want to ask you a question, because this is something I've been thinking of. I don't have the answer. Somebody asked me this today. So she doesn't go to Congress, right, to see Bibi Netanyahu, Israeli prime minister's address. And in my opinion, no matter how you feel about Israel, I happen to be very pro-Israel, but no matter how you feel about Bibi Netanyahu, whatever, I thought optically it was a bad move, because to be there and to be forward facing and to see a lot of people, it kind of cements the fact that she's presidential, or that, she can be in a room with, that's a lot's going on. And the reason I bring this up is because I saw that and I went, wow, once again, as you pointed out from 2020, her political instincts are always wrong. And that's not something that's unique to her. It happens a lot in this administration. But the part I can't figure out is there no one on her team? Is there no one around her that's savvy enough, like the Pod Save America bros? Are there no holdovers from the Obama years who go, hey, I know you don't love Bibi Netanyahu, but this is a good thing to be at. This is something people are going to be watching. You want to be out there. Like, where are the people who can direct her? Because is everyone on her team that out to lunch as well?
Right. Well, listen, it's a great question. And we don't know if that's the case. Does she get terrible advice or no good advice from them? Or is she just disagreeing and just saying, no, I'm doing it my way, and her way is the wrong way in almost every case. So, we don't know the answer to that yet, quite honestly. But I think it is clear that and by the way, regarding team, it's clear that she's not a very good boss, right?
Yeah.
We know from the turnover in her own office, in the vice presidential office, that people do not work for her for long. They apparently do not like working for her. So that's certainly part of the problem. And then in addition to probably having a very poor team and an unhappy team, her own, to your point, her own political instincts are just incredibly poor. Look,
You know-
most Americans don't know Kamala Harris yet. That's the
Right.
reality. Those of us who are so into politics, right? We know all about her, okay? But most regular Americans who are busy with their lives and aren't political freaks or political nerds, they don't know much about her yet. Our job, I believe, those of us in the movement, our job now is to expose who she is. And once we do, I think they're going to absolutely firmly reject her. I just want to.
I think that, Grace, I actually love the point that you just brought up, because we keep hearing about, I mean, she's meeting with Netanyahu today, but that opportunity to stand at the rostrum and look presidential, preside over, you don't say anything, but
Right.
there's an imagery to it. And I think that's a really good point that you're making, is that I get she wanted to show the Michigan primary voters that are pro-Hamas. We'll talk about that hopefully in a minute. But like, she wanted to show them, see, I'm not going. But I think she missed an opportunity. And by the way, you want to talk about another excuse where the media gave her a pass. They were like, oh, she had a scheduling conflict. Do you really think that they organized this joint address of Congress without running it by? That's how it works. The Senate signs off as well. She's the president of the Senate. I mean, the media was like, oh, she had another event. She had to be with her former sorority sisters. I mean, she knew about this. They signed off on the date. They knew it. And yet, again, the media pass over pass. Before we continue, I want to talk about something real significant that happened this morning that plays into this. Before I do, we keep talking about running. Well, I might be able to run as fast as I used to, but I do a lot of walking and training. These are my gravity Defyer shoes. Oh, my God, what a game changer they have been. As you guys know, I'm getting along. Not Joe Biden old, but I'm, getting there, and I've got hip and knee and shoulder, every issue, right? But I still like to be outside, and these gravity Defyer shoes, the cushion and support they give me is like nothing I've ever felt before in my life. They've got Verso technology, which is like this stuff that a trampoline's on, and when you walk, you feel it. It's like a cushion. It has really changed the not just the ability to walk, because I'm pretty able, right? But the comfort that I get in going out and going for a walk or going to the gym or whatever. I've got a pair that's just for running, but if you go to the website, gdefy.com, you can see they've got sandals, they've got training shoes, running shoes, or whatever. If you go to gdefy.com right now and use Spicer30, you get $30 off your $150 order. Trust me when I tell you this, it is going to be night and day, and you will never go back to another pair of shoes when you try these gravity Defyer shoes. The technology, the support, they've got custom orthotics that come with it. Unbelievable change in how you experience walking, training. I've got, like I said, another pair for running. Love them. Anyway, let me get back to this conversation, because one of the things that came up, guys, this morning that I don't think is going to get covered a ton, but China and Russia are doing these exercises. They got intercepted by U.S. military as close as they've ever come to Alaska. This calls into consideration, this goes back to the speech. These guys are testing us right now, I believe. That's my theory. But we've never seen anything like this before, and I believe in the next few months, I'm really worried about our national security, Steve Cortez.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a super important point. And of course, with your military background, you know this better than most. The bad guys of the world know that they have from now until January with a totally incapacitated American commander-in-chief. That's really, really frightening. We have, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Sean, we have a national security crisis right now, not in the future, not in a few weeks. I mean, presently, we have a national security crisis because it is clear that Joe Biden is incapacitated. So he needs to resign. And I think we need to continue. Look, so many of us, particularly those of us who have campaign backgrounds, we're immediately pivoting to Kamala Harris, which is understandable, of course, right? And how do we expose who she is to the American people? But as patriots, putting aside partisanship, as patriots, I think we also need to, at the same time, and we can do both, also continue to hammer the point that Joe Biden is not fit to be commander-in-chief. By the way, to combine the two issues of national security and politics, I also find it amazing that he wouldn't do Kamala Harris just the political favor of making her president. I mean, if you're bowing out of the race anyway, why would you not bestow that upon her? Number one, he could claim the history making of essentially anointing the first female president ever. But number two, she becomes President Harris, which is a very different way to run and a much stronger position to run. I think, again, it's very revealing that he will not do that for her, even outside of course, the more important national security considerations of having an incapacitated commander in chief.
Yeah, I think there's this balance between wanting to take that credit, which I've always argued is the legacy that he'll leave of appointing people because of their identity versus their qualifications, but wanting to cling to power for the last, several months to get all that straight. Grace, we saw President Trump at this rally in North Carolina go after Kamala. He says, I'm not going to be a nice guy anymore. The media went nuts. Oh, here's Trump again. And I'm like, no, that's how Trump always is. And B, what did you want him to do? Be like, I want to welcome her. I sent her a Blue Mountain greeting card today and edible arrangement. I mean, well, this was insane. What are they supposed to sit back and wait? He was defining her yesterday. He stuck to policy. I thought this is exactly what you're supposed to do in a campaign. And the media went nuts.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with listeners on my show where I've been and there was a really good piece by Bonchi in Red State where he said the same thing, like Trump this is a change. This is a different candidate in every single way you could imagine. She's not an 81-year-old man who can't put a sentence together. The campaign has to shift accordingly. And I think what you just said, keeping it about policy, keeping it about the parts of this administration that she's tied to, which also happen to be the worst parts of this administration, her incompetence, all of those things, and steering away, which I think is hard for Trump to do, but he's been showing a little growth in that area, steering away from the personal attacks, steering away from the things that might turn off women voters who we do need, and really making it about the impact that she's had in the last 4 years in this country. And I get grief when I say that. People call up and say, well, how come they can, make all these jokes about Trump, and how come they can do this? And I had a caller yesterday and I said to him, when they make those jokes about Trump, when they take those really low-hanging fruit, kind of grotesque jokes or memes, does that change how you feel? Or does that make you more adamant that you want to vote for Trump? And the caller said, well, it doesn't change how I feel. And I said, right. So it's not an effective way of trying to convince people that you're the best candidate. Trump needs to define her for her policies. He needs to define her for what she stands for. I think Hogan did a great job of that in the beginning of the show, listing all of those things. There's plenty there to go with without making it seem mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, Hogan, it's funny. We keep talking about the media, and yesterday they chided all of us on the right for, God forbid, referring to her as the border czar. The folks at the Media Research Center came out with this great video. It's on their Newsbusters handle. I want to play it for you because this just shows you what we're up against. Let's take a look at the video if we can.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. She was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So the border, if they weren't planning to address it in a major way, do not make her your border czar. She met with some of the Northern Triangle countries, but nothing has effectively changed.
Hogan, I mean, it's amazing. They are literally doing backflips to scrub her record, to present her as the greatest candidate ever. And it's these crazy people on the right that are just trying to malign her.
They're memory holding the whole thing. And what the left hates more than anything is when they do a thing and we notice. And we start to point it out. And then they go, no, we didn't do that. We didn't say that. But you actually did. She was the border czar. But again, the messaging here is a little bit interesting because people say she failed at the border. No, she didn't fail. She succeeded. This is not by accident. This is by design. What they wanted was a wide open southern border, and she made sure she kept it wide open. So every rape, every murder, every burglary, every assault committed by an illegal alien is 100% preventable. And she caused all of this when you allow people to come in through the southern border unchecked. That is the message. Remember, that was the top 1 or 2 issue with the economy for months now. It didn't used to poll that highly. Now it does because the impact of those people in our communities and the drain they had on our healthcare system, on our school system, on our first responders is so evident. And now you're seeing all the news coverage on the deaths and the rapes and the things that are happening that are so despicable.
you have to point to who caused this and the policies that enabled these people to come across. It is clearly Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. That's something, as we were talking about, that needs to remain kind of the topic and the issues, because once we get through this convention, that sugar high will still be here, I would imagine, through the Olympics, et cetera. Once we get to that convention, it's going to come down to those issues. And the more we can continue to define her as what she is, the most radical person ever to run for president, the better off we'll be.
Hogan, I think that is such an important point. And my suggestion, and certainly what I have been doing with my platform, and my suggestion to others, including the Trump campaign, is to use actual people and real names and real stories as much as possible.
Yeah.
Laken Riley, I think, is the worst and most appalling example. There's a lot of bad examples out there, but it is the most appalling. A 22-year-old woman killed on a seemingly safe campus at the University of Georgia in the middle of broad daylight. Laken Riley is alive and studying nursing today if Joe Biden wasn't in the White House, if Kamala Harris didn't insist on an open border. That is the reality. And I've done a lot of polling of the swing states for my new organization. And one of the things we have found is, which isn't that surprising, number one, a lot of people don't know about Laken Riley. They simply don't know the story. Georgians do, but outside of Georgia, not much awareness because the media, of course, stopped talking about it. But number two, the higher the awareness, the higher the likelihood to vote for Trump. So it's very important. We need to tell her story and others like it, of course. But again, I think that's the most powerful example of a lot of bad examples.
There are, I think also, Stephen, maybe you can work this too. And I'll have this conversation with the powers that be if I can. Right off the top of that debate, when Joe Biden said he'd never lost an American service member on his watch, and then turn around and play those clips from the Gold Star families, the sobbing, the disrespect, right? The grotesque nature in which he tried to make that claim.
So, Grace, the thing that I found interesting about what Hogan's talking to is this idea of all of these folks in the media literally remaking her into somebody that they want, right? They are going to make sure that we know who she is according to them, and all of the bad gets blocked out.
Yeah, and there's also something, and this didn't occur to me till right now hearing Stephen Hogan talk about it, but there's something inherently contradictory about not wanting her to be labeled the border czar, because if you heard Biden's speech last night, he said, the amount of people coming in right now, we've really tamped down on this issue. So hold on a second. If you've done such a bang up job on the border and you think it's such a winning issue and you're so proud of the work you've done, why wouldn't you want her to be the border czar? If you're so proud of how effective you've been, then you should be championing that and taking the border czar title and waving it around for the election. Why all of a sudden is everyone so skittish about labeling her the border czar? Could it be because the border has been a colossal disaster? But again, they do this with everything. It's like they want their cake and eat it too. Oh, we've done such a great job on the economy. This is the best economy. And then they go out and campaign and say, people are living paycheck to paycheck. Well, if you've done such a great job on the economy, then what are you talking about? And it's the same thing with the border.
Can I say two things on that? One, I think the point that Hogan said, I've been saying this forever, and I think it can't be underscored enough. Every time Republicans say she failed at the border, it's not true. They want more voters. They have been allowing this to happen. This is the plan, folks. This isn't a failure. It's a success. And I think that we have to remind people that, stop using the language that she failed as being the border czar. She succeeded. There's a reason she never met with anybody. She never got to the root cause. They know the root cause. It didn't take a meeting. They chose this path. That's number one. And number two is, I thought last night, and I brought this up on the live that we had after the speech, it was a sleight of hand. When Trump left office, it was January, right? One of the highest migration months that occurs in a calendar year. Where is it right now? One of the lowest. And so Biden said, right now, it's lower than it was when my opponent left office. Well, no kidding. Guess what? Because it's like saying there are fewer people going to school right now in the middle of July than there are. But it's like, that's a fact. There are fewer people going to school right now than when my opponent left office in January. No kidding, because it's summer, dum-dum. And no one picked up on that in the media because, my God, that's not it. Grace, I want to switch to something, though, that we have this morning meeting every morning at 9 a.m. with Mark Halper and Tim Hogan. I have heard about this 2 mornings in a row, so I want to get your take on this. They are all going nuts, saying that this clip of JD, by the way, again, let's just frame this. Nothing that Kamala Harris ever said in the past is viable for discussion. But this clip that they dug up from him on Tucker Carlson, where apparently he was making a joke, about women and Catwomen. Let's see if I want to play it for you, because apparently this is what is animating women all over the country, and I need to get your reaction to this. So let's go to the clip, and then I want you to tell me, one, if you're offended by it, and B, if you're hearing about it.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Grace Curley, one, you're on the radio all day long. You hear from people, you write boom, you are the demographic that apparently is outraged. Are you outraged, and are you hearing about this from every one of your friends?
No, I know that Jen Aniston came out today and she made a statement about it. And
she's not a friend?
No,
she's not a friend of yours?
I do love Friends. I watched it a lot during my maternity leave. I think two things can be true at the same time. On one hand, I think that talking about the importance of families and talking about parental rights in this country is a topic that's come up, and there is a way to articulate that I think would be better than what he said. And I'm also going to tell you, as a 31-year-old woman, I understand why people see that, who maybe don't know J.D. Vance, who maybe don't know his story, who maybe don't know his politics, and it might rub them the wrong way. I do get that. And I do understand that people having children, especially people my age, you think your whole life it's going to be easy, and then it's not. It can be a really sensitive topic, and I think it deserves a sensitive approach. I do. I might sound like a snowflake. I do think—
No. It's important to understand this.
And I do think that you have to keep in mind that a lot of people aren't childless by choice. It's not something that maybe necessarily they wanted in their lives. So I don't think you ever want to make people feel like they don't belong in the party or there's not a place for them. On the flip side, though, and I do want to be clear about this, it's not lost on me that the same people who were quiet over the last 4 years, where there are plenty of tragedies, plenty of disasters, plenty of deaths, because of this administration, are now seizing and pouncing and weaponizing on a 20-second cut from Tucker Carlson in 2021. Like the political part of it to me isn't lost, but I do think going forward that maybe there's a way J.D. Vance can articulate what he's trying to say in a way that's a little bit less exclusive of people who we want to bring into our base. We don't want to make people feel like there's not a spot for them here.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an important point, that in other words, what JD was getting at is valid and correct and super important, but probably not the best device. I think he was trying to be funny in terms of his word choice to get there. Now, I happen to know JD Vance very, very well. I worked for him throughout 2022 in his Senate campaign, both the primary and the general election. So I've spent a ton of time with him. And I can tell you, and this wouldn't surprise anybody who's read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, or seen that movie, family is so important to him, largely because he grew up in such a dysfunctional family. So he had a terrible, difficult childhood that he's been very open with the world about. And because of that, though, he has been so incredibly intentional about creating a very different home and a very different family with his wife and their young children. So it's so important to him on a personal level, and on a policy level. It's key right now that the birth rate in the United States is plunging. So the future of America is in doubt. Now, the left's answer to that is, well, let's just import the rest of the world, whether we can vet them, whether they share our values or not. No, but our answer is, let's make it easier. Let's incentivize people to have children, and let's be a pro-family, pro-child movement. And in that regard, we are different from the left. And part of it, by the way, is, yes, it's not surprising that leftists have a lot fewer kids than those of us on the political right and the cultural right? So, I mean, it's okay to point all of that out. And again, I think JD will do a great job of doing it in a way that seems less dismissive, right, from here forward, that everybody should have their own freedom to make their choices in their life. But we want to make the choice of having children and having lots of children. We want to make that easier for Americans. We want those kinds of pro-family policies.
And to your point, like, this is a guy who, not, you mentioned his family story, right? He understands the power of strong women. That's who he was raised. Fatherless home. He's got an unbelievably strong, dynamic, and intelligent wife right now. He understands that. Hogan, I want to shift, though, what Steve said to sort of how to address this, like your wheelhouse, media-wise, right? What is this is now getting passed around by the left. Oh my God. How strategically, how should JD Vance's team address this attack by the left?
I mean, it's such a... I understand how it can kind of seep into the conversation in this election. Don't get me wrong, because the left blows up everything. It makes everything, the most overused word in the entire Trump administration was bombshell. Every day was a bombshell. It was so frustrating and so infuriating. This is one of those things that's going to pass. It's something that Kamala Harris will say from the stage and say, look at how he thinks or whatever. But there's no question that our party revolves around protecting and promoting family. The left doesn't, okay? Whether it's their abortion for any reason, any time up until the moment of birth, whether it's, celebrating, and now it used to be safe, legal, and rare. Now it's celebrating and shouting your abortion. They mock women who choose to be homemakers and mothers because they didn't go to the widget factory and work for some corporate boss for a year. So I think focusing on not just the family structure, but also giving parental rights back to the family is important, because not only is it poll high, but most Americans feel that very way. And that's what they should be focused on from a campaign side, because from here until now, we're going to have so many of these little clips that emerge from Vance, from Trump, from Kamala, and whoever she picks as a VP. But the left won't talk about those. The media won't talk about those. They're only going to try and make this a referendum on Trump. And they were losing that battle up until Joe Biden got out. So while this race is very similar to how it was, there are a few differences there, and they're stark. So we have to understand that moving forward down the road, because this is the fight between now and then. These little things like this, while they can be blown up and be called bombshells, I still think it's a pivot back to the policy of things like paid family leave that Trump actually gave parents, the economy that you had when you could afford gas and groceries, things like that, I think are really what win the day. And that's where they need to stick.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, this has been an unbelievable conversation, and obviously a lot that we could have continued to get to. I still think the Netanyahu speech and the reaction from folks to destroying America was unbelievable. These defacing, and I want to give a big shout out to Dan Crenshaw and Beth Van Dyne and Mike Johnson, who went and restored the American flag at Union Station, by the way. Thank you guys all for watching. Tomorrow, Friday, we've got an unbelievable special. If you're concerned about what the government and Big Pharma are covering up from us, not giving us the alternatives and the ideas that we should be getting, and you're wondering why, I'm going to answer those questions tomorrow on the show in an unbelievable special that's going to uncover a lot of why we don't get the knowledge, information when it comes to our healthcare and our choices that we see today. Always feel free to subscribe to that free Substack that I have, where I answer a lot of questions, put out poll questions, SeanSpicer.com. We went live last night. That's another reason why you hit the notification button. Hit subscribe on all those things: Getter, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.